you and me both. Although we did make the championship last year. We lost, but...
Carrie, are we good? Are we up and running?
I missed it. Is Charlotte here?
She's sick again. She came and then she left.
Oh, I was going to say, I didn't see anything from her.
She was here and then she... I can't do this. Good? I call the regular council meeting of the Norton City Council for Monday, February 25th, 2019 to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silent reflection. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Mr. Gaynor?
Here.
Mr. McClone?
Here.
Mr. Carrot?
Here.
Mr. Towsley?
Here.
Ms. Whipke?
Ms. Whipke is excused.
Mr. Pilat?
Here.
Mr. Kernan?
Here. Moving on to communications from the public. Mr. Prelon? Alex? What's your last name? I'm sorry. Terrible names. You have 5 minutes if you'll just give your name and address, please.
Alex Phelan, 2800 South 11th Street, Kalamazoo, Michigan. So, good evening. I am working on the Dollar General project located at 3296 Cleveland Massillon. I work for a company called Hurley and Stewart. I'm a civil engineer and project manager for this new development. My company works for a company called Capital Growth Buchalter. They are a nationwide developer who is working on this development. And so I wanted to make myself available to you to answer any questions if you have any questions regarding this new development.
Does anyone have any questions or anything?
I think you mentioned last time you were here, you all wanted to break ground in March. Is that what you said?
Yes, that's our hope, is to be able to break ground. Obviously we have lots of approvals that we'll need to get through. We've gotten probably 90% of our approvals to date. I think our last approval that we are waiting on is from City Council, and then also the Ohio EPA needs to give us our final approval.
If that approval happens, how long does it usually take to get everything finished? The building and everything?
From a construction standpoint,
Yeah.
from start to finish?
Yeah.
It's typically a 4-month process.
Okay.
It kind of depends on weather and all that stuff, but in the general range, that's what they try and shoot for.
Okay.
Anything else? Any other questions or comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to Committee of the Whole. Are there any reports from the standing committees? All right. We had, I'm just going to handle them both at one time. Mr. Towsley, if you want to just maybe
Okay, thank you, Mr.
go ahead with
President.
those.
As everyone's aware, the Barberton Jail was closed and then opened and now open. Speaking with Chief D'Alessandro, he wants to put another plan in place. So we're not in the same position we were before, where all of a sudden we're out of options. So we have in front of us 2 options, Summit County Jail and the City of Cuyahoga Falls Jail. Summit County would be $123.55 a night. And I can deal with both these at the same time, right?
Yes, yeah, why don't we just go ahead?
Cuyahoga Falls is $79.94, which is a little closer to what I think our current agreement with Barberton was. And please, anybody correct me if I'm wrong, but from what Chief D'Alessandro told me, a little bit of a benefit of Summit County is they can do video arraignments.
Video arraignment, that's correct.
So that actually is a little bit important with transferring prisoners to and from the arraignments from the jail. An officer has to do that, and that takes up valuable time. I want to let the administration speak further before I say anything else.
Yes, go ahead.
Members of council, we received notice in February that Barberton was going to close their jail. We scrambled to get a solution. Part of the issue, and I've addressed some of you prior, that we still had to go through, both of these will require approval on both legislative bodies. The county council, I believe, is meeting the 25th, which, whatever that is, it might be today. So we need their approval. So we needed a temporary solution, and then we needed some backup. Both of these contracts do not cost the city any money unless we house a prisoner. So there's no monetary impact to the city unless we were to use them. Second, and most importantly, there's a finite number of beds slotted at the, I almost said Ohio County, the Summit County Sheriff's Office. I believe they had 10 openings, of which 6 maybe have spoken for. So that leaves 4. So if we don't act on this contract, we get 2 of those 4. So no, essentially we're going to, not have beds available. They're only going to contract for the number of beds they have. So I'm was reluctant to ask you to do that, to introduce it and pass it, but we got put in a situation that I didn't have a choice. And I apologize. I was supposed to be here last week to bring it up so we could have addressed it at the committee of the whole. But we're here now.
Would these would there be kind of like a hierarchy? Would we use Summit County first, and then we would go to Cuyahoga Falls if we needed to? I mean, how would that work?
I think ultimately we're going to probably prefer the sheriff. One of the things Mr. Towsley brought up, while the cost of the per night stay at Cuyahoga Falls is $50 cheaper, that doesn't factor in, and I made a statement when we confirmed the jail was going to be remaining open, that keeping officers on the road is our most important job. And having to transport someone, if we arrest someone, transport them to Cuyahoga Falls, they have to process them. That officer's off the road from the time they make the arrest till the time they get back. The next morning, they have to go to Cuyahoga Falls, bring the person back to Barberton Municipal Court, and then subsequently take them back to Cuyahoga Falls Jail. So while the $75 or $78.94 or whatever that number is does not account for those 3 trips, which essentially is 6, right? It's up and back, 6 trips to Cuyahoga Falls, the time that officer's off the street, and all the other ancillary costs associated with that. So I think the primary choice is for Barberton to come up with a solution to keep the jail open. Secondly, we would use the sheriff if something happens to the Barberton. And then, as a tertiary plan, we have Cuyahoga Falls if we would need it.
And we want to have all of these contracts in place so that we can make the best choice when and if that eventuality comes
If
about.
something would happen, Barberton would shut down, we would have some options. Yes.
Okay.
And we do have already in place a contract with Barberton, correct?
Yeah, it's informal arrangement. It's been long-standing at that rate. And the benefit of Barberton, and Robert may have mentioned this, I was trying to look up on County Council's agenda to see if our ordinance was there, our resolution was there. I thought they were going to introduce it tonight. They do take the prisoners up and down to the Muni Court once that we house there, so there's a big benefit there to stick with Barberton if possible. But we got to have the backup plan, so that's why the need for Cuyahoga Falls in the county at this time.
And you guys, Mayor and Mr. Fowler, are negotiating, I assume, with the proper people to do that, correct?
We have met with some folks of Barberton last week. Whether you define that as the proper person, I don't know the answer to the question.
And we had met with them prior to the initial shutdown, which kept it open. We came to that agreement, which kept the jail open. So we've met with them multiple times.
There are other people other than Norton and Barberton, if I'm correct, that uses the Barberton City Jail, and I would hope that they are involved in any monetary decisions to help keep that jail open.
The more communities involved, the less than it would be for the whole.
course.
But I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the
we
jail,
also said-
we've made it clear in our discussions that the jail can't be kept open solely on the back of Norton, and it requires
That's
everyone
nice.
who's
Right.
using the jail now to continue to use it, using some sort of allocation formula, looking at like bed nights based on who uses it the most. Those are the kind of things that make sense. So we're talking about that now.
As we discussed, I applaud the contingency plans here. Has there been any consideration of discussing with Wadsworth, or is that like a no-no just because of the county lines, or is that,
Last week, but.
yeah,
They use Medina County, so they don't have a jail. When I asked the chief about that, he said they take all their prisoners to Medina County.
And Medina County is similar to Summit County, has been similar to Summit County in that they struggle with overcrowding at times as well. So we've reached out to all the other area jails, including the county jail in Medina County, and these were the options that were the most attractive. Medina County said, no way, we can't do it.
Our main objective, if I'm right, is to have a jail that will hold the prisoners, such as the ones that have been mentioned, misdemeanor type people, until they see a judge. Disposition is done through the judge, and then they could go to Summit County, or of course, if it's a felony, they will anyway. But I think I mentioned to you, Mayor, that about 6-hour, 12-hour, things like that. Is that being looked at also?
We're talking about the 6-hour jail, the 12-hour jail. My understanding, those, like with even downstairs, we don't have the certification, even though we have a holding cell. It's not a certificate, there's not a certification there to even be able to use that as an option.
I'm not talking about overnight.
Yeah.
though.
Yeah, times have changed. It's become very difficult to operate a jail, even for a temporary basis. And just talking to Barberton last week, you need like a dietitian on staff. I mean, things that are, it's not
Even
like
for-
not like the old days.
Even for the 12-hour, you
Yeah.
you
And
still,
Well, a lot of the ones that were operating in the past, if you let your operation lapse like we did, we no longer have the certification. So you could be grandfathered in from some of the requirements if you continually operated that type of facility. But once you stopped operating it, restarting it is very difficult.
but are those new regulations financially prohibitive compared to the added cost of helping Barberton with their jail, or going to Cuyahoga Falls, or going to the Summit County Jail in the long run? I'm not talking about overnight, but in the long run, would it pay us to have our own small facility for a 12-hour
Yeah.
license?
All I can tell you is we've been talking about this a lot
Okay.
the last 3 weeks, and
All
never
I
once
know.
has that come up as something that we want to pursue from the chief. And so we're really taking his lead on what would be not. I mean, we all have to evaluate the financial decisions, but in terms of operational, he's not thought that was the route to go. So we've
Okay.
not pursued that.
Fine.
do we know if Cuyahoga Falls has any plans underway to offer video arraignments?
Don't
I'm
know.
not sure.
Any other questions or comments?
Robert, do we ever, what's the chance of us ever recouping some of our expenses from the prisoners? Does that rarely happen, or do we usually get something?
We've had those discussions. Again, we're one of those discussions that we've had regarding the funding for the jail. Is there a way that there are other ways to fund that operation? And so I will say we've looked at it, but it's not not as clear cut as one would hope.
Okay.
Anyone else? So unless the administration corrects me on this, it's my thinking that, though I'm not a fan of introducing and passing on the same evening, I think for public safety and to have a plan in place that we should move this forward tonight if at all possible.
I would agree with that.
And then we'd like to reiterate though, basically there's, as far as financially, if we don't send anybody there, it's to no cost to the city.
Mr. Fowler, please.
And I just want to say to council, we've had this discussion administratively only because the county requires it. We felt that it would be under the 5,000 threshold. I mean, even if you add up all our jail nights, et cetera, that it would be under the 5,000 threshold. But because the county required it, we brought it to council just to make sure. You know, anything over 5,000 would have went to Board of Control under the new charter. Anything between 5 and 10 would go to the Board of Control, and then everything over 10 would come to council. But the county's requested that this come to council now.
What was our annual spend last year to house prisoners?
13.5.
Pardon me?
I think 13.5. I have that number. I don't know if I don't want to misstate it. We'll get you the number.
Okay.
I was the chief.
Okay, so with that, I am going to make a motion to add ordinance number 33, 2019 to tonight's agenda with emergency language and intentions to waive second and third readings.
Second.
And
It is because it's under committee of the whole, poll all of council, please.
Sure. Mr. Towesley?
yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Carratt?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke? Mr. Pilot?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
And then also I'd like to make a motion to add ordinance number 34, 2019 to tonight's agenda with
Also
emergency
second.
language.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Carratt?
Yes.
Mr. Pilot?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes. We have a public hearing at 7:15, but I'm going to go ahead and do the minutes and the reports, and we'll just do that a little bit late. Minutes of the regular council meeting of February 11th, 2019. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections to those? Hearing none, then they'll be accepted as submitted. The minutes of the committee work session of February 19th, 2019. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections to those? Hearing none, they will also be accepted as submitted. Reports from officers, boards, and commissions. Mayor Zita.
Thank you. At this point, I'll just wait and I'll have some public service announcements at the end of the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fowler.
I want to make members of council aware that currently being considered in the legislature is a House Bill 62. It's a transportation funding bill. I went to Columbus on Thursday, spoke on behalf of the city and the Ohio Public Safety Directors. Part of that bill includes an increase in the motor vehicle the motor vehicle usage fee, or what we commonly call the gas tax. So that 18 cents may seem nominal to most people, but if this passes, it could increase some significant funding for us for roads. So I did meet with Bill Romer while I was in town, talked to him. He was part of the finance committee. But just to tell you that I'm not a big fan of raising taxes, but due to the increased fuel efficiency of motor vehicles, transportation funding has stagnated. They put in a escalator with a CPI index. This is the governor's proposal. We stand to benefit immensely from it. I would recommend that all of us reach out to Mr. Romer and other legislature members with whom we may have a relationship and encourage them to support this bill. As it stands, we stand to realize somewhere in the neighborhood of possibly $200,000 next year for roads, which really could help us do some work in the city. So just wanted to, you may have read the OML bulletin that came out Friday. They had my testimony But just wanted to let you know that we felt strongly administratively that we should have our voices heard in Columbus.
Thank you. Mr. Met,
Go ahead.
Mr. Messner,
Nothing at this time.
Mr. Markey,
Nothing at this time.
Mr. Gaynor.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Mr. Fowler briefly if he could, if he knows, how do they determine on the gas tax, how it's distributed and proportionately? How do they determine how much each city gets? Is it how much gas tax is collected from that exact area, or?
No. So all the money collected statewide goes to a pool. ODOT gets a percentage. The county, as it's proposed, the county will get, each county, all 88 counties, will get $1.6 million based on the current revenue received. And then each municipality will get a increased proportion. And I apologize, I don't have that breakdown, but it equates to about a 60% increase for us. Maybe a little bit higher.
It's based on the number of cars registered in each municipality.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, and there's a sheet that ODOT, we can forward it to you. There's a sheet that ODOT put out on Friday that has the full that's an Excel spreadsheet that has the full breakdown by community of what it would be under the 18 cents per gallon proposal that DeWine proposed.
And the only other thing is that breakdown sheet include zip code 44203, or does it include the city of Norton? And
It designates it by Norton and not by zip code, just by Norton, Barberton.
that's what
Yeah,
okay, thank you.
separates them out.
Sorry, Joe, go ahead.
Nope, that's fine. Okay, we're going to move on to our public hearings. And we have a couple public hearings for some agricultural districts. So I now declare the public hearing convened on resolution number 26, 2019. This resolution number 26, 2019 is a resolution to approve the renewal for placement of farmland located at 2395 Wadsworth Road, Norton, Ohio, into an agricultural district. Will the clerk please certify the legal notice was published in the Barberton Herald on February 14th, 2019?
I so certify.
Is there anyone who wishes to speak for the said renewal? Please give your name and address to the stenographer.
Yes, David Maxon. And actually, it's 2392 Wadsworth Road. Was the actual.
Okay. The, Mr.
You have the application.
Yeah, Mr. Markey, the application says 2395 Wadsworth Road.
Yeah, well, it's the one that.
We just want to make sure that we do everything right for you, so.
Yeah, make sure parcel number's correct
Right.
as well.
As long as the parcel number's okay, we're all right.
As long as one of them's okay, we're okay.
Right.
It is. The parcel listed as 46-00314.
Why don't you go ahead and let him speak on behalf of it while I'm looking?
Okay.
No, it's the one, it's 261 Wadsworth Road, Barber Road, up Clark Mill Road. Owned the property, been in the family since 1897, I think. Been passed down through the family. I'd just like to keep it in the agricultural district. Does anybody have any idea when the easements? I wasn't able to get this about 18, 20 years ago when they did the sewer and water line along Barber Road. Any idea when that assessment's gonna be paid and done with? Because I was not able to get the agricultural district from the previous administration, and I'm paying
Well,
a ton of money on taxes for paying for that on Barber Road that I'm not using the water off of it, the sewer. I was just wondering if there was any idea or how to find out if that's about paid off yet or not.
we'll probably have to have someone do some research for you and get back to you. So
Yeah, we can
Mr.
either do
Markey.
the research. You can call the county fiscal office and ask them or tell them you want to know about the special assessment on their property. They have a whole division that does this. They'll be able to tell you
Okay.
when the last year is. We should be able to find that out as well, but you could also just call the county directly, and
All right.
they could tell you as well.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And it looks like, looking at that parcel number that's listed, it does show up as 2392 when you search it, but the acreage on the application matches the acreage on the fiscal officer's website based on the parcel number. So
Okay, so we're
I think
we're
okay.
good.
I think we're okay.
Okay, all right. So, is there anyone else who wishes to speak for the said renewal? Please step to the podium, give your name and address to the stenographer.
James Lino, 5058 Grove Avenue in Norton, and I'm in favor.
Thank you, Mr. Lino. Is there anyone who wishes to speak for the renewal? Please give your name and address to the stenographer. For the final time, is there anyone who wishes to speak for the said renewal? Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the said renewal? Please give your name and address to the stenographer. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the said renewal? For the third and final time, is there anyone who wishes to speak against the said renewal? Please give your name and address to the stenographer.
Mr. Maxon, is that a good phone number for you? The 330-21, is it 212?
All right, I now declare the public hearing closed on Resolution 26, 2019. I now declare the public hearing convened on Resolution number 27, 2019. Resolution number 27, 2019 is a resolution to approve the renewal for placement of farmland located at 5040 Fairland Road, Norton, Ohio, in an agricultural district. Would the clerk please certify the legal notice was published in the Barberton Herald on February 14th, 2019?
I so certify.
Is there anyone who wishes to speak for the said renewal? Please give your name and address to the stenographer.
James Lino, 5058 Grove Avenue in Norton, and I'm in favor.
Thank you, Mr. Lino. Is there anyone who wishes to speak for the said renewal?
Yes, David Maxon, 1764 Blake Road, Wadsworth. I'm in favor of it.
Thank you. Is there anyone who wishes to speak for the said renewal? Please give your name and address to the stenographer. For the final time, is there anyone who wishes to speak for the said renewal? Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the said renewal? Please give your name and address to the stenographer. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the said renewal? For the third and final time, is there anyone who wishes to speak against the said renewal? I now declare the public hearing closed. All right. We will move now to introduction of new legislation. Resolution 26, 2019. Mr. Gaynor.
Yes, I'd like to introduce 26, 2019 for its first reading only and have the clerk read it, please.
A resolution to approve the renewal for placement of farmland located at 2395 Wadsworth Road in an agricultural district.
And I guess we do want to waive the second and third reading and vote.
So there's a motion to waive the second and third
Yes.
readings.
Yes, please.
Mr. Markey, do we need to change the 2395?
And it's in the caption of the legislation.
Should I have him change his application? I have the original application.
I would think it is a,
Administrative correction.
Typo?
Yeah. I'm okay with the administrative correction.
okay.
Okay.
I don't think we need to go through a full formal process for amending.
We have a motion and a second
Yeah.
to waive second and third. Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. Carratt?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Towsley?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke? I'm sorry, Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Motion to approve.
Have a motion to adopt?
Yes.
Second.
Would the clerk call, is there any further discussion? Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. Carratt?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Towsley?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes. Resolution number 27, 2019, Mr. Gaynor.
Offer 27, 2019 for its first reading, please. Ask clerk to read it.
A resolution to approve the renewal for placement of farmland located at 5040 Fairland Road in an agricultural district.
Motion to waive second and third.
Second.
A motion and a second to waive the second and third readings. Is there any discussion on the waiver? Clerk call the roll, please.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. Carratt?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Towsley?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Motion to approve, adopt.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 27, 2019. Any further discussion? Clerk call the roll, please.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. Carratt?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Towsley?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes. Resolution 28, 2019 will fall to me. I offer 28, 2019 for its first reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
A resolution authorizing the submission of an application to the Ohio Public Works Commission for financial assistance through the State Capital Improvement Program and the Local Transportation Improvement Program for 3 projects in the city of Norton and committing to provide funding for the local share of each project and declaring an emergency.
And that'll be for first reading only. Just to let everyone know, this is so that we can apply for some grants on these 3 projects. There wouldn't be any assessments to any residents for any of these projects unless they had decided to hook up themselves. So, ordinance number 29, 2019. I offer ordinance 29, 2019 for its first reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance authorizing the purchase of a 2019 Dodge Durango for the zoning department at a cost not to exceed $28,100.
And that is for first reading only. Is there any discussion regarding that? I know that we had spoken about the Durango versus another vehicle option. My understanding is that there was a question regarding whether we could do that, and because it's Mr. Markey, you can explain
Yeah,
this
so
better.
the question was, do you have to consider them the same type of vehicle for public bidding or for competitive bidding purposes? And in my opinion, because they're 2 separate vehicles, if you were looking at 2 Ford Explorers that had the same price or 2 Dodge Durangos that had different prices, I should say, similarly equipped, different prices, that you'd have to apply the competitive bidding statute to. But when it's 2 different vehicles, it's 2 separate products. You don't have to compare them apples to apples. You could look at them separately and just choose the vehicle that you want. You'd want to have the best price of the Durango that you're going to buy, but you don't have to compare it to the Explorer or vice versa.
And also, just as I had mentioned last week, I think it's important for us to support local businesses, and I think the Durango that we're looking at is from Fred Martin. Okay. So I think it's important. They've given a lot to the city. It's important to give that some consideration. There was also some questions and some discussion as to whether or not we could just buy 2 trucks instead of a Durango in the truck. My understanding is that the Durango would not only be used for the zoning inspector, it would be used for other administrative functions, some of those being to attend meetings, conferences, and things of that nature. It makes sense to have a vehicle that can hold more than 2 people. In case more than 2 people want to travel, you don't have to take 2 vehicles. So that was part of the reason for the request from the administration for the Durango. Is there any other comments or discussion? Like I said, it's the first reading tonight, but certainly we can discuss anything at this point.
I just have one question.
Mr. Towsley?
Would that be the primary vehicle for such a thing, for meetings and such? In other words, is there another vehicle that can be used, or is that?
I mean,
primary
for
vehicle?
example, last week I used the police chief's vehicle. I took it to Columbus. So I mean, we do use multiple vehicles. The concern I have is buying all pickup trucks gives us zero flexibility. So having a multitude of vehicles, we don't want all 5-ton dump trucks because we need some flexibility, and I wouldn't buy all pickup trucks because then you have zero flexibility.
Okay.
Mr. Kernan,
Yes.
just to clarify, because I know sometimes this gets said, when we talk about giving back to people who have helped us in the community, this truck is being bought on state bid term sheet, so it is competitively bid. So I know sometimes there's accusations that get thrown around about, why are we buying trucks or buying this Durango from this company? But it's still a competitively bid product, so we're getting the best price that the state's already determined for us. So
Thank you.
just wanted to
Thank you. I
clarify that.
appreciate you bringing that up because that's an important point to make
Yep.
also. Anything else on this before we move on? Ordinance number 30, 2019. I offer ordinance number 30, 2019 for its first reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance authorizing the purchase of a 2019 Ford F-150 truck for the Service Department at a cost not to exceed $24,412.67.
And that's for first reading only.
67 cents.
67 cents, yeah.
$412.67. I'm sorry, you guys.
That's okay. I think we all knew what you meant.
But she looked confused even after she said it. Like,
All right. Ordinance 31, 2019. I offer ordinance 31, 2019 for its first reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance authorizing the purchase of a 2019 Ford F-250 truck for the Service Department at a cost not to exceed $27,251.30.
And just to let the public know and everyone know that the last two vehicles, the two trucks, are part of that Service Department replacement program that we've been trying to get into place, both replacing 1999 trucks that are now in service. Ordinance.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Pilot?
Based on that, are those 99 trucks that are in the service department now, are they usable? Are they using them? Do we need to try to move this timeline up on these trucks? Do they have these trucks in stock there?
I think we have time. We're doing what we can to accommodate not using those vehicles. I believe the green truck is completely decommissioned, but we're doing what we can to avoid using those vehicles at this time.
Okay.
Those trucks have to be built. They're not on the lot. They have to be built.
Okay.
So we have time.
Okay. Ordinance 32, 2019. Mr. Gaynor.
Yes, I'll offer 32, 2019 for its first reading only, and go ahead.
An ordinance tentatively approving the preliminary final plat of the site plan for Dollar General at 3296 Cleveland Maslin Road.
If I could, before we move
Yes,
on
Mr.
that,
Gaynor.
Mr. Fowler, there was a question about some engineering comments that was going to be made on this. Have they been taken care of yet?
Mr. Slega has emailed saying that he is fine with the plat as it is presented.
So we're not waiting for anything else, just for the readings to take their
So
course.
then, should we or should we not change this to a final, this ordinance on the second reading? Shouldn't it be changed to a final instead of preliminary final? Is it necessary is all I'm asking. If it's not, it's fine with me, but
We could leave it as is. It's approving the plat, so I'm okay with the language as it is.
okay.
Mr. President, I was
Yes,
contacted
Mr.
earlier today about this and from the project manager, who I believe is here. And I point him towards Mr. Fowler. We're being requested to pass the second and third reading.
That was my point.
And my question is, I didn't know what the justification was, if it was necessary. I wanted just to raise that question.
That was the reason I was asking Mr. Grant about the engineering. If we have everything in place, I think we should waive the second and third readings and approve this. I mean, is there a reason why we can't?
Personally, I don't know what the emergency is.
Well,
That's my problem too. I didn't know.
the understanding, this fellow here can correct me if I'm wrong, is they're wanting to get this started in March. Am I right or wrong?
They may.
And so if we approve it, pass it on, then the only thing that's holding them up is them.
Well, and EPA approval. So I've not.
Well, I don't know about that, so.
Well, he mentioned that earlier. That's fine.
I see no reason.
The request? No. Yeah, I would say no, since we were not aware of the request. We're not for it. Okay. Waiving readings tonight.
Maybe, once we get the EPA in
Right.
that, at that point,
Yeah,
excuse me, maybe we can waive. this
So
is the
maybe,
second.
yeah,
This is only a first, correct?
yes. Maybe at the next regular meeting, if we know that the EPA approval has been granted, then we could waive, but there's no reason for us to do that if
Yeah.
they're still waiting for that. Okay. All right. Ordinance number 33, 2019. Mr. Towsley?
Thank you, Mr. President. I offer ordinance number 33, 2019 for its first reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance authorizing the execution and delivery of an agreement for the boarding of prisoners with the County of Summit and declaring an emergency.
And this is the legislation we spoke about in Committee of the Whole. So at this time, I'd like to make a motion to waive second and third readings.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to waive second and third readings. Are there any discussions regarding the waiver? Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Mr. Towsley?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. Carratt?
Yes.
Mr. Whipke? I'm sorry, Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Okay, so at this time, I'd like to make a motion to adopt ordinance number 33, 2019.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt. Is there any further discussion? Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Mr. Towsley?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. Carratt?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes. Ordinance number 34, 2019. Mr. Towsley?
Thank you, Mr. President. I offer ordinance number 34, 2019 for its first reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance authorizing the execution and delivery of an agreement for the boarding of prisoners with the City of Cuyahoga Falls and declaring an emergency.
I'd like to make a motion to waive second and third readings.
I'll second.
A motion and a second to waive second and third readings. Is there any discussion regarding waiver?
Yes, Mr. President. With both of these, I just, because there's really no money at stake until we use it, and for the safety of everybody in the city, I think this is rather necessary, so.
Thank you, Mr. Towsley. Any other discussion? Will the clerk call the roll, please?
Mr. Towsley?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. Carratt?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
And at this time, I'd like to make a motion to adopt ordinance 34, 2019.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt 34, 2019. Any discussion? Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Mr. Towsley?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. Carratt?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
And those two items are just contingency plans for if anything happens with Barberton.
And Mr. Kernan, I did
Yes,
get
Mr. Markey.
answers. I was asked earlier about the cost, and Chief Del Sando confirmed it was a little under $10,000 total what we paid to Barberton last year.
Okay.
And then the other, I was able to confirm that County Council put the resolution on their committee of the whole tonight, and they're intending to pass next week.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Yep. All right. Under introduction of prior legislation, ordinance number 5, 2019. I offer ordinance number 5, 2019 for its third reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance to amend section 408.04 of the codified ordinances of the City of Norton, Ohio.
I move to adopt ordinance number 5, 2019.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? I will just indicate this is the updating of the parking fines, is it? Yes, the parking fines. So it would be a $20 initial fine if it's paid within 3 days. It's $25 after 3 days, and $30 after 30 days, I believe. Okay. Any further discussion? And I don't think we've updated this in years.
It's been many years, and it's been
Yeah.
a few years since we've written a parking ticket as well. It's just to put us in compliance with the other communities within the Barberton Municipal Court.
Great. Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Carratt?
Yes.
Mr. Towsley?
Yes.
Resolution number 7, 2019. Mr. McGlone?
Thank you, Mr. President. I offer resolution number 7, 2019 for its third reading. Ask the clerk to read it, please.
A resolution confirming the reappointment of Sandy Crescent to a new 3-year term as the Ward 2 representative on the Board of Zoning and Building Appeals of the City of Norton and declaring an emergency.
I move to adopt resolution number 7, 2019.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 7, 2019. Is there any discussion?
Yes, Sandy was a good selection when we had her 3 years ago, and I'm glad to see that she's going to do the Board of Zoning again for us.
Any further discussion? Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Carratt?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Pilat?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes. Ordinance number 11, 2019. I offer ordinance number 11, 2019 for its second reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance to authorize the administrative officer to enter into an agreement with Engineering Associates Incorporated for professional engineering services in connection with the design of water line improvements in the city.
And this is for second reading only tonight. I think this is for an amount just for public knowledge not to exceed $83,000. So, ordinance number 12, 2019. I offer ordinance number 12, 2019 for its second reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance to authorize the administrative officer to enter into an agreement with Engineering Associates Incorporated for professional engineering services in connection with the Eastern Road waterline extension in the city.
And again, this is for a second reading only tonight. That is for an amount not to exceed $67,000 for observation of construction. Ordinance number 13, 2019. I offer ordinance number 13, 2019 for its second reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance to authorize the administrative officer to enter into an agreement with Engineering Associates Incorporated for professional engineering services in connection with the design of State Route 261 waterline loop in the city.
And that again is for a second reading only. Ordinance number 14, 2019. I offer ordinance 14, 2019 for its second reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance to authorize the administrative officer to enter into an agreement with Environmental Design Group for professional engineering services in connection with the New Park Drive roadway improvement.
And this is for a second reading only also in an amount not to exceed $75,000. Ordinance number 15. I offer ordinance number 15, 2019 for its second reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance to authorize the administrative officer to enter into an agreement with GPD Group for professional engineering services in connection with the design of sidewalk improvements on Easton Road.
And that's for a second reading only. Again, this is for an amount not to exceed $29,700. This is for us to apply for grants. Again, repeating what we said last week, there wouldn't be any assessments on this. We're looking to pay for this if it gets done with grants and by the city.
Mr. President?
Yes,
I
Mr.
do have a
Parent.
question about this.
Sure.
There were three questions, actually. If we do get this grant, which I'm very much for it, I think it's a good move, but I have a couple questions relating to the maintenance of it. Once it's in place, then does it fall automatically to the homeowner to maintain that? Also, is there a certain amount of warranty on that work for a number of years, thus making the homeowner less responsible in the future for repairing and maintaining that? Not that they're not going to maintain the sidewalk and clean it, but that the repairs would not be part of their indebtedness. I'm just trying to look down the road because this group of people, for the most part, those homeowners have just been hit with some septic to sewer conversion, and there's a lot of unhappy people there that are not really excited about funding the repair of a sidewalk that they didn't ask for. Understanding that it's not costing them anything to put it in, I'm just looking down the road, which I think is my job here.
So the question is, who maintains sidewalks?
Yeah.
The homeowners.
Okay.
Correct. Is there some sort of warranty on the work on those sidewalks for the future?
Oh, for the you're talking not you're
Looking
not
down
talking
the
about
road.
maintaining for the maintaining for snow removal.
No.
Right, no,
Not at
like
all.
if it
About the
cracks
actual
or
repair.
something.
construction of
Yeah.
I mean, our normal construction warranty, so we'd have an engineer, we'd have an inspector who would inspect the work, and should there be any defect, we would be able to have our normal, rights to go back on the contractors.
For how long?
Not infinity, right? I mean, so at some point the sidewalks fail because it's concrete, and that just is what it is.
I'm just trying to get some better answers, so when I get asked that question, which I have been already, that I'm prepared with a better answer.
So I guess the question, which is a good point I had not thought about. When we talk about maintaining the sidewalk, we talk about snow removal and things like that. Obviously, the homeowner has to do that. We all realize that. 20 years down the line, the sidewalk cracks and it heaves and it's uneven. At that point, who is required to fix the sidewalk, the city or the homeowner?
So I think the city can, it's like a tough decision, right? So it's up to the council at the time. You could, if you wanted to be draconian about it, you could assess people to fix the sidewalk.
Okay.
I don't think people would do that, right?
Right.
City can fix the sidewalk just like it put in initially. It's a public improvement, so if it wants to replace, it could replace. I don't view people as, looking to slam someone on a sidewalk. There's probably sidewalks already in the town that could be replaced that are just in disrepair anyways. Just because that's what happens to sidewalks over time.
Right.
My opinion is the way it works is nothing really changes unless there's a complaint. So that's what I'm kind of coming away with, but I don't know that as fact.
Maybe it's worth some further discussion. Do we start a fund where each year we contribute to that fund for the replacement, repairs? Something worth discussing. I agree that those homeowners have already been hit with quite a few expenses, but I believe that the sidewalks are much needed, especially through that area from the perspective of children walking to school. And it's beneficial for anybody walking in the evenings or during the daytime, whatever. But I think it's warrants discussion whether or not we try to fund that or how we're going to go about it in the future.
And I would assume that we're at the very beginning of this process. We haven't even applied for grants, and so these are discussions that we can have further down the line if we move in that direction.
And not to, maybe this is a butthead comment, but I would expect just a reading tonight. So maybe if there's questions, we could email them in so we have an opportunity to research them and answer them as opposed to going off the cuff.
Yep.
Just briefly, before you move on, as far as I know, every city sidewalk that I've ever seen in my life was maintained by the homeowner. If they do go bad, if a root pushes them up and breaks them, the homeowner is responsible for replacing that section of sidewalk. So let's try not to give them any false hopes, because if those sidewalks go in, if they're done like they are in every other city and every other sidewalk in our community today, if those sidewalks go bad in front of your house, you have to replace them and maintain them for the public safety, and it's for your own benefit anyway. If you have a bad sidewalk and you allow it to deteriorate to the point where there's bumps and cracks in it and someone falls and breaks a leg on it, they're going to sue you and they're going to win, because you have a responsibility as an individual homeowner to maintain that sidewalk. And in the past year that I've been on council, and even several years before that, I've heard several people come to that podium right there and out in the public through the newspapers and such and complain about Easton Road not having sidewalks. And I've heard the remarks made, if you'd like to pay for sidewalks, we'll put them in. And now we're willing to look for grants so they don't have to pay for them. And they're going to have safe sidewalks if those grants are found and we do build the sidewalks. They're going to have safe sidewalks for the children, not only for the people who live on Easton Road, but the way I understand it, it'll be from anybody from up Greenwich Road to Easton and then down to Panther Way. So that's quite a good addition, safe addition for the children in that neighborhood that's been needed for years. And all of a sudden now, I hope nobody's complaining about no assessed sidewalks. And if we can get grants or whatever to pay for them and they have to maintain them in the future, so be it. That's just the way life is. I mean, I don't want to spend any more money than I have to either, but you have to maintain the sidewalks in front of your house. That's a known fact. There's no disagreement with anybody on that.
So I'm going to, this is a discussion more properly had in committee of the whole. The ordinance before us today, only for a second reading, is just to authorize the engineering services for this thing. So we can certainly have this discussion under committee of the whole some other time, but I'm going to kind of cut it off there because obviously people haven't been given a fair opportunity to answer the questions and come up with the answers that they need to. So ordinance number 16, 2019. I offer ordinance number 16, 2019 for its second reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance to authorize the administrative officer to enter into an agreement with GPD Group for professional engineering services in connection with the design of a stormwater improvements to Worcester Road.
And that's for a second reading only. Ordinance number 18, 2019. I offer ordinance number 18, 2019 for its second reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance authorizing the execution and delivery of an agreement with UBS Financial Services Incorporated for financial advisory services.
Right. Are there any public service announcements?
I don't know that it's necessarily public service, but I'd like to ask the administration, I brought it up last week or a couple weeks ago, if we could please take a look at our expenditures for engineering services throughout the city. And does it make sense to bring something like that in-house when we start looking at that total spend? I understand by going outside, we're able to utilize people's expertise in many different areas. Yes.
We've had this discussion on the floor. You don't hire an engineer to oversee the construction. A construction manager has a different skill set than a PE. It's not practical. We've already reviewed it time and time again. It's not practical to do that. You don't have a PE that is a construction site manager. You don't pay a PE $100+ an hour to go stand on a construction site. It's not practical. It's way too expensive. The projects are not long. They're very short duration. A lot of times there are multiple projects at one time. It's just not practical. We tried explaining that prior. We have reviewed it time and time again. Large cities have engineering departments that cost in the neighborhood of $1 to $2 million a year because you have to buy the CAD software. You have to pay for their benefits. It's not practical for us to bring it in-house because we don't have a lot of projects. Plus, you need a survey crew. The manager doesn't include a survey crew, so you have to still pay for the survey crew. So there's a lot of parts to the engineering. When you hire a firm, they have multiple people working on the project. And that's why it's more cost beneficial than the city hiring 2 surveyors, a construction oversight person, and an engineer to design it.
Mr. President, can I interrupt real quick?
Sure, Mr. Housley.
When we were looking at ordinance number 16, 2019, a question came to my mind for the administration. Earlier in the evening, we were talking about House Bill 62. The success of that bill, does that have any bearing on Worcester Road, or is that already done and over with?
So just so we're aware, the Worcester Road was funded through the FWHA, the Federal Highway.
Okay.
It's federal tax dollars.
Okay, I'm on confusion.
No, but that's a federal gas tax. So there's a federal gas tax and a state gas tax, right. And the federal gas tax is what goes to fund AMS.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Public service announcements, Mayor?
Yes. Excuse me. Thank you. I just want to announce that the Norton FOP 119 will be hosting a night at the races on Saturday, March 16th. It will be at the Barberton Slovene Center. Doors open at 5:30, dinner's at 6. The first race starts at 7. Tickets are $15 for the event. You got a horse name sponsorship for $10 and a race sponsorship for $100. Any other further questions, though, you can direct to the Norton Police Department. And there's a couple of the officers down there that are fielding the phone calls.
Thank you. Any other public service announcements, Mr. Fowler? Mr. Messner? Mr. Markey?
This Saturday, the Norton Women's Club is hosting the Scotch Doubles, and it's $45 a couple. It includes all the games, food, prizes, and it's a wonderful way to support the Women's Club that does a lot for the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
And what time and where at?
The bowling alley right over here, which I can't remember the name.
Charger.
Charger.
Right, Charger. And I believe it's from 7 to 10.
Okay, thank you.
Also, we want to mention tomorrow evening at 5 o'clock, between 5 and 7, there's going to be a discussion about, or a presentation or discussion, vice, whatever, about 585/Eastern Road intersection. Sounds to me like it's going to be pretty interesting, and I'd suggest that anybody that's interested in a dangerous intersection and ways to fix it might want to attend that meeting. And there's also a planning commission tomorrow evening meeting at 6 o'clock, so you can make half of that one up there and then scoot on down here and see the planning commission.
Okay, my understanding though for tomorrow night, that is it's from 5 until 7, but it is not a 2-hour meeting.
No.
It is a kind of an open house type thing. You walk in, they'll have easels set up, they'll be on hand to answer questions and so forth. But it's a kind of come as you are, come as you go kind of thing. So
Donuts and coffee?
probably not.
And that's the Shirley McGuire Community Center.
Yes, it is.
Any other public service announcements? Hearing nothing else, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.